Welcome to TrueNAS Enterprise Customer Success. Today's guest is Scott Call, IT Director for California-based Viz Media. Viz Media has been an internationally recognized authority on manga for more than 3 decades, authoring Shonen Jump magazine and producing hits including Pokemon, Naruto, and others here in the U.S. Scott, tell me about your role at Viz Media and the critical function that storage plays at your firm.
I am the IT director. I've been at Viz for almost 15 years in several different roles. This is my latest, and I've been the director for 2 or 3 years now. My role is I run our internal facing IT department. My customers are my fellow employees. We have a separate group that handles websites and apps and those kind of things. Because we do a lot of work with video, having reliable and scalable storage has been a huge business requirement for us for a very long time. We will get TV episodes from Japan, and then we'll produce a subtitled version pretty much immediately. So that way we can have it out about the same time as it goes on the air in Japan. And then we work with studios, usually in Los Angeles, to do an English language version. And those come out usually a few months later. Some titles we're able to do it faster. It just depends on the production cycle for how that works. That's our main storage. We also publish 20 to 40 books a month, and they're about 200 pages each. They're essentially all graphic novels. So those take up a fair amount of space, but nothing compared to 30 or 40 gigs per half hour of video.
How many workstations, client desktops, and other devices are supported by your storage environment?
We have a hair under 200 employees. So on any given day, there's probably around 150 people connecting throughout the day. We have a hybrid environment. Sometimes they'll be in the office on the LAN, and other times they'll be going over VPN. People have different habits. I'll see sometimes where people connect and stay connected for a week at a time, and I'll see where people connect, get a file, and disconnect right away. It seems to just be people's personal preference.
Please tell us about your previous solution based upon an older Supermicro system running TrueNAS storage software.
The one that was replaced was probably 6 or 7 years old at the time of replacement. Yeah, we had built it ourselves, installed TrueNAS on it, and kind of kept it up to date, but it was not completely up to date at the time it was decommissioned. At that point, it was SAS2, it was 4 and 8 gig drives or terabyte drives. So it didn't make sense to try to rehabilitate it. It made more sense to get new hardware and higher capacity drives and go from there.
When planning your storage system refresh, what were your performance, capacity, and scalability considerations?
Definitely a boost in performance. We are still spinning disks just because the capacity makes going spinless a little expensive, but having the more powerful CPU and in general newer equipment does provide a nice speed increase. Our capacity, we have 2 servers, and this was just replacing one of them. It replaced one that has about 370 usable terabytes, and the new system has about 500 usable. We did want to get that bump in there because we wanted to pad ourselves against future growth, but also knowing that if we do reach the capacity of the head unit and the one expansion shelf that we can add to it was definitely on our minds. Most of the servers were VMware. We have actually, within the last year, transitioned to scale computing for our virtual infrastructure. We have a couple of Linux servers sitting around so the network works if the virtualization server doesn't. Pretty much it's virtualized, mostly Linux, some FreeBSD, and some Windows on the server side.
Given Viz Media's history with FreeNAS, when planning your system update, did you consider other vendors' solutions? And why did you choose to stay with TrueNAS?
We initially made the decision to stick with TrueNAS in some form just because we really didn't have any complaints. It worked for us. We were used to managing it, and it wasn't lacking anything we really needed. The decision really came down to was, did we build it ourselves again, or did we go through you guys? When we first started, it made economic sense to do it ourselves, but our business grew quite nicely during the pandemic because when you stick people at home for a while, they buy books. When we made the decision that we didn't have to do it ourselves, and that has kind of paid off in droves, a couple of the support situations we've had to access. And so I really am glad that we did that decision.
Viz Media chose an IX Systems TrueNAS M50 high availability storage system with about 500 terabytes capacity. Have your capacity needs changed over time?
The main tank data pool or data set has about 535 usable capacity. That was our initial purchase, and we haven't had to add to it because we added about 50% when we bought it compared to the old system anyway.
Please tell us about your deployment process and experience. Was it a big rip and replace effort, or was it pretty seamless?
It was pretty seamless. We essentially stood it up and then used a ZFS send to synchronize the pools or the data sets. And it was probably a protracted process. It took a few weeks because the initial sync, even at 10 gigs, took quite a while. And of course, then we had to catch it up to any changes. And so it was kind of like every day we would update it. And then eventually we told people there's going to be a few hours where they couldn't change anything on the old system. And we did a final update and switched over. So that was relatively painless. There was one issue that popped up soon after we went live, which was some of the permissions on our files were kind of being a little wonky. So we did open up a ticket, and it turned out basically our permissions were wrong, but a previous version of Samba had thought they were right. So the software was doing what it was supposed to. They just fixed the bug and it caught out some of our permission problems. So we were able to correct that with the help of the team.
Overall, how would you describe your experience with the support team?
It was good. The immediate tier 1 response is very fast. When it kind of became obvious that it was out of their wheelhouse, they immediately escalated it. Like, it didn't feel like I was pulling teeth to get the attention. It was pretty funny because by the time it made it to probably your engineering team, which was really only a day or two later, it was not at all slow. Is the response I got was, oh, I talked to so-and-so who happened to be the guy who wrote this code in Samba, and here's what he says. So the fact that you guys have that guy on your payroll was like really nice to have that level, because there are a lot of people who make products by gluing open source together, and I was impressed that you guys actually support the open source end of it too.
In terms of lessons learned, if you were recommending TrueNAS to IT directors in a similar situation, what advice would you give them on migrating from a proprietary environment to TrueNAS open storage?
It's really pretty easy. It does help if you have a knowledge of ZFS, but it's not a requirement. But there are some concepts that, if you know, make a lot more sense on how and why you do certain things. The only thing I would say is make sure for sharing any shares you have, if you can't just wholesale reset the permissions on the new system, make sure your permissions you have will work, and do a lot of testing before you release it, because we kind of just did a cutover, and if we had had people test for a little while, we might have caught that one particular issue early.
We've been speaking with Scott Call, IT Director for Viz Media. Our thanks to Scott and you, our audience, for joining us today. We hope that you have found this time to be well spent. For more information about how TrueNAS Enterprise Solutions can deliver true data freedom to your organization, please visit the URLs listed on your screen. If you'd like to start a conversation with us, please click on the chat box or get a quote button on the TrueNAS website for a free consultation to learn more about how we can help your organization achieve true data freedom.